That was Stephen Rush's Etude Number 1, played on the Carillon of St. Rambouts in Mechelen, Belgium. That was the main instrument of the Royal Carillon School from which I graduated about a month ago. And almost every other day, I was in a little wooden cabin about the size of a bathroom. The nearest bathroom, by the way, was 500 winding stone steps down. And the wooden console that I'm playing on is suspended in a cloud of bells, hanging like ripe fruit. The smallest bells are about the size of flower pots, and they're hanging above me in rows. And the largest bells are this big. The largest bell is named Salvator, meaning Savior. It weighs 8,884 kilograms. That's more than 5 SUVs combined. At the touch of my finger, I can delicately depress a baton so that the note that I play, only the person next to the bell can hear it. I can also stomp on the pedals and pound the keyboard using my fists, the normal technique to play this particular carillon, and cause a thunderous noise that's carried for miles. When I'm done, I lock the door, race down the cathedral, and escape out the little red side door into the street. So when I tell people that I carillonned in Europe last year, what I really mean is that I was a menace to thousands of people and got away with it, especially when I play contemporary classical music. So, what is a carillon? A lot of people ask me that, and that's expected. Also, why? The what is easy. The carillon is the largest and heaviest instrument in the world. It's also probably the loudest. The only comparable instrument is the pipe organ. Sitka has bells in St. Michael's, but they're played using ropes. The carillon has a keyboard. There are about 600 carillons in existence on 6 different continents. 300 of them are in the Low Countries, northern France, and western Germany, which together is about the size of New York State. The United States has 164 carillons, one of which is in Harkness Tower at Yale University. And that's where I first learned how to play and fell in love. Why? I don't know, but it feels so typically human to obsess over something so strange and rare, to be different. A long time ago, I played piano, but I had to quit because I wanted to paint instead. Carillon was my second chance at music. So after I graduated college with degrees completely unrelated to music, I decided to study carillon professionally at the oldest and most prestigious carillon school in the world, in Flanders. The other 2 are close by, though, in Holland and northern France. I had the time of my life in Belgium. And my favorite part was traveling to play other carillons. And even though St. Rambouts, where I played, kept me busy several times a week. You wouldn't believe the carillons that I got to play. I mean, there are tiny, tinkly ones at the top of abbeys, large, tower-trembling ones that was in a spider web full of wires that connected the keyboard to the clappers of the bells. There were carillons that were stuck in the corners of attics, that were at the top of open staircases, of ancient ladders that aren't even nailed down at the top. So when people tell us to break a leg, sometimes we do. And I got to play bells that are 500 years old, cast by bell founders. And they must have been geniuses because they were able to cast perfectly tuned bells without modern tuning systems. At the start of the 17th century, they started tuning bells by shaving out the inside, like cannons. But before that, they didn't know how the bell founders did it. And even today, keeping all the processes the same, good and bad bells come out. The casting process is complicated and unpredictable, which makes these bells completely magical. In fact, as carillonneurs, we're just passing through. The carillon is 500 years old, and it's seen history. It's older than the piano. And the bells are thousands of years old. Playing on one of these old instruments is like playing on a Stradivarius violin. And as a visiting carillonneur, all you have to do is ask. In medieval times, the why was more practical. Bells were important in your life because they told you how to live it. In one part of France, there's a special bell rung to warn mountain folk when the tax collector was on its way, so they had time to hide. And there's also a bell that's rung to wake you up, a bell that tells you to go to bed, a bell that tolls for dinner, for death, for birth, for fire. There's a bell for execution. There's a bell for revolution. And when a town is conquered, their enemies break their bells, which would be like breaking their spirit. Bells came before clock hands. In Dutch, clock means bell. So the number of times the bell rang was the hour. And then to sort of make sure that people counted correctly, they would play a jingle. And the most famous of these jingles is the Westminster Chimes, and this is how it goes. It plays in Sitka every noon. And then eventually this jingle was programmed on a drum like this with pegs, kind of like a music box. And that's when the bells became a musical instrument. And that's how the carillon was born. And then every week, the carillonneur would sit alone in his tower and play for the people. But the carillon sounds completely different from any other keyboard instrument. That's because the bronze that's made out of about 78% copper, 20% tin, 2% of impurities, and the bell shape determine the pitch and the overtone structure of the bell. So normally, the amount of tin determines the brightness of the bell. So too little tin and your bell is dull. Too much tin and your bell will break. That's why the Liberty Bell has a crack in it. Another broken bell, and a really funny story, is the Tsar Bell outside the Kremlin in Moscow. They wanted to create the biggest bell in the world, and they did. It's huge. It's 20 feet wide and 20 feet tall. But before installation, it was so heavy that it fell, and a door-sized piece broke off, and now it's being used as a chapel. Anyway, the perfect balance of brightness and fragility is struck in a bell, and you listen carefully. You can hear that the bell is made of more than one tone, and the normal overtone structure of a regular Western instrument goes something like this. This is for C. That's really bright and happy and really nice. This is the overtone structure for a bell. Okay, so there's a minor third overtone that's very prominent, and that makes the bell have its melancholic resonance that makes minor pieces sound so particularly well on this instrument. Like this arrangement that I made of Bach's Organ Fantasy in G minor. Everything has to be Baroque. You can play other things as well, like John Corder's Blues for Bells. right? But that's not the weirdest. I've also played Lady Gaga and Justin Bieber and the Harry Potter theme song. I mean, anything. And also, hundreds of composers have written especially for the Carillon, including John Cage. Nowadays, the iPhone has a ringer called bell tower, and when people hear bells, they think it's a recording or a computer's playing it. And because we're anonymous, carillonneurs are easily forgotten. It's not technology that threatens Carillon art. It's obscurity and isolation. There are scores of carillons out of use, like this one at the National Zoo in Washington, D.C., without even a ladder to get up to the top. Even though the carillonneur is invisible, our work is physical and dirty. When I finish playing, I've soaked through the shirt, armpits of my shirt, even in winter, and my hands are grimy with sweat, dirt, and machine grease. You would think, with all those carillonneurs over time, they would have sponged up the accumulated dust on the stone walls and stairs, but there's still enough grime to get on my pants. And my left leg spasms more than my right because the winding stairs only go clockwise. And I kick off my shoes, I step into my thin-soled slippers, and I grasp onto the railing just to go on. My throat dry, my calves clenching, and I get to the top, and that's where the door of the playing cabin is. All of this, and I haven't started playing yet. The large force required to overcome the stricture of heavy metal forms calluses on my pinkies, and that's just an occupational hazard specific to playing God with the public sound waves. They're hard-won battle scars, but now the batons mold perfectly to my hands, ready to strike. I start with pieces that I know by heart, ones that make me feel like an extension of the large instrument. My eyes are closed, my body swaying with the dynamics. My hands and feet know where to go based on muscle memory. When I play more modern pieces, though, I feel like a professional whack-a-mole player, hitting the notes with speed and accuracy that only a kid at Chuck E. Cheese's could comprehend. But then I make a mistake, and the wrong note rings and rings and rings with a characteristic minor third echo. And I feel like giving up. I feel like pounding diminished chords. And because who cares anyway? No one knows it's me. I'm embarrassed and angry at my irrecoverable blunder. But I don't, because someone is always listening. So I play the lyrical Godfather love theme instead, to smooth things over. It's easy to hate these single melody line chestnuts that people who in the summer bring lawn chairs to listen with in the courtyard. They don't have virtuosic strings of arpeggios that I can use to show off. It's like polyphony was never invented. But then I remember how I fell in love with the carillon, listening to a lamenting strain of a popular serenade, played not for the amusement or fancy of the musician, but for a community, a city, a people. And that's why anonymity is beautiful. It allows the carillon to humbly be a part of everyday life, to rain music down from the sky, not more and less important than the bread that is baked every day. So I don't think it's necessary to know what a carillon looks like, or how it's played, or the history of bell making. When you hear something that catches your ear, be it a carillon or a whistling stranger or a singing bird, pause your conversation and listen. Don't listen even, just feel. Let the music pass through you as though it's ringing through a substance purer than air. Let it, and you'll become empty enough to join the atmosphere, a collective sigh composed of the town's rustles and murmurs, supporting a melody that rises above. Thank you.